Aloha, friends and family, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Embodied Healing Self. And I am super excited to introduce my lovely guest this week, Wellness Lately's Bridget Shannon. Bridget and her partner Dana are holistic health coaches and founders of Wellness Lately, which is a global brand dedicated to helping women stop dieting, beating themselves up, and feeling like shit. Through a blog, a podcast, live events, online coaching programs, they deliver useful, actionable, no bullshit information to help women feel confident in their own skin and live a life that they are psyched about. And their mission is to reclaim the word wellness from a diet culture and show women everywhere that in order to be really well, you've got to stop dieting and trust your body and start living. So I'm sure my listeners can understand why I wanted to have this lovely guest on the show, as she is totally in alignment with my beliefs around wellness and the personal journey that I have had as well. I also want to share just kind of some other inside things about Bridget. She is an ironically introverted Sagittarius and manifestor. She is prone to moving, currently docked on the seacoast of New Hampshire, a lovely, lovely area, by the way, which I have visited a couple times in the past year. Yeah. She is mom to Lucy, the mischievous beagle. I have a dog that has part beagle, so I feel
you know it.
And a variety of plants hanging on for dear life. Does that mean that your thumb isn't quite green?
It's not. It's more yellowish. I feel like it's a work in progress.
I love that. She loves hot sauce, Jeopardy, Stevie Wonder, and skipping out on just about anything for beach walks. We have that in common as well.
Yes.
She hates Microsoft Excel, anything numbers related, really. So thank you so much, Bridget, for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm psyched to be here. And it was really, really interesting to read that back because I have not, it was like, oh, that's what we do. That's who I am. I haven't read that in a while. And I feel like there's some changes in there. Even since I wrote it, I am very prone to moving and have since moved from New Hampshire to Maine. So still on the seacoast, but different, at least for a little while. We're in Maine until we move back to New Hampshire soon. And I have acquired another dog. So just as mischievous and also part beagle. I don't know why I keep acquiring beagles because they drive me crazy, but they're also the best and sweet and everything else. So
awesome.
Thanks for reading that.
Yeah. Thank you for updating us. And, it's always interesting to read these because most coaches and people, healers in the wellness industry, it's like we're always evolving. And so, I feel like every 6 months we kind of have to go back and revisit like what we wrote. So,
right.
Yeah. So for my listeners in my community, many of them were aware of the Envision 2020 challenge that we both participated in. You and I were both speakers on that. And one of the things that you have brought to light for me and that you shared during that experience and that you and Dana really focus on is kind of like, I want to say like releasing that body shaming or that diet mentality and really looking at wellness as something so much deeper than just what we look like or even how we eat. And, in my personal journey as a holistic health coach as well, because you're both holistic health coaches, a lot of my focus on wellness and eating healthy was always intuitive eating as well, which I know you're really big on intuitive eating, but there was really like this focus on eating healthy to feel really good. And I didn't know at the time that there's like this other deeper layer until I learned the process, right? Of like our relationship with food, which is just as healthy as how the food makes us feel. And so I witnessed it in the women that I worked with over the years, that there was like a deeper layer to this whole this idea of what wellness is, this idea of what it's like to be healthy and fit. And most of the women, if you ask them, I'm sure you find this, and this applies to men too. I work with mostly women, but most people, what they really want is confidence, and they want to feel good in their body, and they want to stop the judgment, and they want to be healthy, but they want to be happy with where they are. And I really feel like you guys do such a great job addressing this. And I love your kind of like no bullshit approach to it, because there are a lot of, conversations happening in the wellness space around what it's like to be healthy. So I want to invite you to share a little bit with me kind of how you got started being in this space of supporting women in this way.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And thank you for the kind words about our work. There's so many layers to it. I think we tend to think sometimes, like you said, about wellness in terms of what we're eating and are we doing it right? Like, are we doing all the right things? There can be this element of perfectionism in the wellness world, which is where a lot of the food stuff and body stuff comes up. I mean, to the point where we both, Dana and I, my partner, we worked in the wellness industry for a long time, and we saw a lot of thinly veiled diet culture. So a lot of people pushing the right, quote unquote, right diets, or the right way to eat, or the right way to live, or the right exercise to do. We saw a lot of that as described as wellness, and yet it's kind of has a tendency to make people feel even worse, because if they're not doing it right, they're not living up to this, standard, or if they don't have the right body type for wellness, or if they don't, they're not reaching their goals, and we can get into this, but a lot of times the prescription is a diet of some sort, and diets never work. They're not sustainable. We know, we can look at the actual research and know that the failure rate is 99% over the course of 5 years or so. And so they work in the short term, but not in the long term for actual health. And yet that's what's being prescribed in the wellness industry, especially when it's sort of thinly veiled as either a lifestyle change or a meal plan or something. It's a diet that's actually not being called a diet, right? So there's that, and there's also this emphasis on fixing our bodies, or trying to eat in a certain way that makes us look a certain way, and calling that wellness. And that's sort of what we call bullshit on. As you say, we have a no bullshit approach, that wellness is not about trying to appear a certain way or trying to fix our bodies to match these ridiculous beauty standards that we all have been sort of entrenched in. So that's, that can be problematic in this industry as well. And kind of the other layer here is that it's catering to a very specific type of person. We're often seeing wellness as something that's reserved for a thin, wealthy, white person, right? When the reality is, and this is where a lot of our work with the health at every size movement comes in, is that wellness is for everyone. And yet in the industry, it can be a little bit elitist, and there's that element of perfectionism that reserves wellness for the people who are looking the part and eating the right way to get there. And if you're not doing that, something's wrong with you. You're failing at wellness, you're failing at health, and it's your fault, right? There's this personal responsibility to get there. When for a lot of people, they're never going to be that because of a number of factors, genetics included. So our whole mission is to really help people step out of that diet culture and embrace a new paradigm that is not about weight loss or fixing anything about our physical appearance in order to be well. And how do we implement healthy habits that can support our individual needs over the long term, and kind of ditch that dieting mentality so that we're eating in a way that is sustainable and actually makes us feel good and doesn't look like, whatever influencer over here is doing, that we think might work for us. And also, there's the body image work and the confidence work, as you said. Most of us just want to feel good in our own skin. And a lot of times we just want to not think about food so much. We want it to be easier and it to be more of a process that feels good and serves us, rather than something that is driving obsessive thoughts or driving really harmful behaviors, which is what dieting can really do for people. So we help people get out of that mentality and embrace a different approach.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. So, for the listeners, if she didn't say something that you felt like you've related to at some point in time, then I don't know how you've gotten this far without relating to that. Because I felt like everything you said is like all the different points that you came across are something that I see happening all the time for many people. And I
Sure.
think that we're all experiencing this relationship with our wellness, whatever wellness means, whether it's working out or eating healthy or connections with your loved ones. There's all these components to it. And we're all experiencing this sort of space of like curiosity and what that looks like, which can also come with judgment that we're not there. And,
Mm-hmm.
so you bring up a really good point about, I love how you mentioned the perfectionism and the fixing, because I would have to say that I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I know I can speak to this personally, but also I see this, I do think as coaches, we do tend to attract people that are also, teaching us along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the pattern that I can sometimes notice is this pattern of perfectionism can also sometimes go one of two ways. It can either keep us stuck and not want to take action at all because we're afraid to fail, or if we're not stuck, we're in overwhelm, because if it's never good enough, then we're constantly doing the thing and it feels
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming because in our mind we never actually get to quote the goal. And you kind of mentioned that word earlier. I think, and I don't know what your thoughts are. I know my thoughts are that goals can be kind of dangerous. I've always told
Mm-hmm.
people, like, don't step on the scale. It's not about the numbers, it's about how you feel. So I see kind of both of these patterns that can come up, which already, if you're saying that you're seeing people with this kind of perfectionism fixing type of thing, like how does one get started if they're already in that space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a good question. And this was my personal struggle too. I'm with you on the
Mm,
perfectionism, high achiever mentality. So what this was the case for me, and it is for a lot of our clients as well. So we think that we need to be perfect and look a certain way and do everything right until we can be happy or until we can be healthy and confident, right? And usually for a lot of our clients, for me personally, that's weight loss. So until we lose weight, we can't go and have the career we want. We can't start dating because, we can't find the partner that we want to be with at our current weight. We can't, we put our whole lives on hold until we feel like we're worthy enough to have the life that we want. And so what we do in the meantime, like we're really focused on fixing our bodies and fixing ourselves. And we spend all of our time and mind space and energy trying to lose weight or trying to fix our appearance. And I say weight loss because that was my personal struggle, and it is for most of our clients. That could be anything related to physical appearance. We all have these, ridiculous beauty standards that we think that we need to look like in order to be happy. And typically that's a very thin body as well. So until we are, laddering up to that ideal of perfection, we can't be happy. So we spend all of our time and energy and money and resources and mind space on trying to fix ourselves, meanwhile putting our whole lives on hold, right? And the reality is we can have those lives at any body, at any size, at any place of our life, but we don't believe that's true. So we believe that we need to fix ourselves in order to be happy and to be worthy of what we want and deserving enough. And there's this element of not being enough, right? That's a really
mm,
common theme with our clients, and it was for me too. So when we talk about perfectionism, it's this perfect body, it's this perfect looking persona that we need to think that we need to achieve in order to be confident. So that causes us to put our whole lives on hold. It causes us to typically enter the diet cycle, which just makes us feel worse over time, and can cause a lot of damage, both psychological and physically, emotionally, mentally. And meanwhile, we're not getting anywhere closer to the life that we want, probably even further away, actually. So that's where this element of perfectionism is so problematic, because we're just chasing this idea of perfection that we think we need to achieve. So, and I'm with you on the goals thing too. I think goals are tricky. I think getting clarity about what we want and who we want to be and how we want to feel is really important. And that's where a lot of confidence comes from, is working toward those things that we have clarity on. But when we make the goal weight loss or changing anything about our physical appearance, we're always going to be chasing that, some arbitrary number on a scale or some, dress size or anything. And that focus is what takes us out of an intuitive relationship with our body and with food. And it causes us to go look for, a diet or a meal plan, or it causes us to restrict, which leads to binging. It really just takes us, it reduces the trust that we have in our own body's ability to lead us in the right direction, which is why we have to remove that focus on weight loss, because it just leads to all sorts of trouble when we get into thinking about goals around appearance of any sort.
Yeah, and I think, this one of the cycles of self-sabotage, right? The Bonnie Kelly whole cycle of self-sabotage thing that can come up in this situation is that someone who is, trying different diets is really setting themselves up for that kind of pattern of reaching a goal that just never happens. And it leads to more emotional distress and more, negative self-talk. At least that's, what I usually witness. And, on one of my podcasts, it was with Dr. Keith Holden, who wrote the book, The Power of the Mind in Health and Healing. He said something that just stuck with me, and it sticks with me in every conversation on this podcast. And it was that healing is in the acceptance of where you are in that moment. And so, that fixer kind of energy, there's a dark side to it, right? Like, we all want to be optimistic. We want to have self-responsibility and intentions to be well. We want to take the inspired action steps to eat healthy, to exercise. Those things are important, to reduce stress, to meditate or whatever. There's this self-responsibility. But then there's like this kind of dance, right? There's this balance of like, okay, so we take the inspired action steps for intentional well-being. And then there's a place where we just have to kind of notice our healthy or unhealthy emotional attachment to that. If there becomes an attachment where we're no longer feeling good about ourselves, then maybe we're going on the unhealthy side of that relationship.
Sure.
So you mentioned one of the things that we need is clarity on who we want to be. And, that the clarity also comes with kind of moves into intuitive eating too, like discovering which foods work for us. What is there anything else that you could say for somebody who's listening right now, who's kind of relating to this, maybe noticing this cycle in their own life? They've done self-work, they're trying the keto diet, they're trying the paleo, they're doing this, they're doing that, and nothing works for them. And they're beating themselves up. And then all of a sudden, because we know what happens, like you get there and then maybe you're outwardly expressing emotions to loved ones, or there starts to be breakdowns in other parts of our life, right? That's what well-being is. So if there's somebody listening right now who totally relates to feeling frustrated with not having the body image that they want, and especially because I'm in my 40s, many of the women I work with, like there's another change that happens in 40s and 50s, and 60s that it's just going to happen. What would you say that is kind of maybe underneath the surface that they might need, rather than searching for the answer outside of themselves?
Yeah, I love that question. And there's a couple layers here. So I'll speak to two things that come up to mind first. One is that we have to look at our beliefs. We have to look at what we are telling ourselves is true every day. And this can, I know that you work with mindset a lot, and and beliefs, but we have to kind of examine those, which can be uncomfortable at first, especially when it comes to our bodies, if we've never done that before. So we have to believe, like we have to look at what we believe about our bodies ourselves and what we believe it means for our life. So asking honestly, do I believe that I need to fix myself, or what is preventing me from accepting myself right now? Do I believe that I need to change myself in order to be happy? What do I think is on the other side of, weight loss or whatever it is that you're trying to change that I can't have now? And typically we can look at our beliefs from our upbringing and our childhood and the people that raised us. Like, what's the belief system we're subscribed to, just inherently, maybe if we didn't even choose it, because that stuff sticks with us. For me personally, there was a lot of, you need to be thin in order to be healthy. You need to be thin in order to be attractive, in order to be loved, and in order to, be happy. So we have to kind of look at these beliefs that we might not think too much of, but they're really impacting what we believe is possible for us and what we need to do. Do we need to, so, that could look like, I need to always be on a diet because that's what being healthy is, because I need to maintain my figure in order to be happy, right? Like that's an example of a belief that might come up. So we have to kind of look at that, and that can be uncomfortable, but it's really like 100% necessary. And we have to, and there's a whole process in terms of replacing those beliefs and rewiring them with new, more empowering beliefs. And that's what we walk people through. But we have to that's the first step. Like, what do I believe? How am I speaking to myself every day? You mentioned self-talk. Like, what does that internal conversation look like? Because we can try eating anything out there. We can exercise our faces off. We can do all the things right. But if we're being a jerk to ourselves, like none of that matters, because our thoughts are creating our reality, right? So if we're sitting here all day talking, really like hammering down about how crappy we look, about like how much we need to go on a diet, about how we're not going to be ever happy or healthy or accepted the way we are now, like nothing's going to shift there for us, right? So we have to look at that internal chatter that we all have and we might not be aware of unless we're really paying attention. So that sort of non-judgmental awareness is really the first step. What do I believe and what am I telling myself? And then the second sort of more practical, tangible layer of this, which is really scary, and why it's, why we think it's so important to get support, is we have to ditch that dieting mentality. We have to drop the incessant focus on weight loss or, changing ourselves, which requires dropping the restriction. So the first step there is getting out of that mentality, rejecting the dieting mentality altogether. Throw out your scale, delete the calorie counting app or whatever you're using, right? Like, you have to get rid of these dieters' tools and reject that mentality. And then it's about lifting that restriction. So if you are on some sort of diet or, depriving yourself in any way, it's about kind of lifting that, which can be really terrifying if we've been on a diet for a long time, but it's the only way we can get to that intuitive relationship with food. It's the only way we can start listening to our bodies, because if we're listening to all the rules or external guidelines of any sort, there's no way we're going to listen to our own cues, right? If we're not honoring our hunger when we're hungry, I mean, there's a lot of trendy stuff out there, right? Like fasting and keto and all that. If we're not eating when we're hungry and we're waiting until a certain hour because we think we need to stick to this plan, it's basically a slap in the face for our bodies, right? We're saying like, we're telling our bodies, no, you're fine. You're not hungry, not listening. And at some point, and there's a lot of, real tangible consequences of dieting that people aren't always aware of. So if we're restricting ourselves and we're not nourishing ourselves and getting an adequate amount of food, our body's going to overcompensate for that, right? So that's what leads to the binging, is when we restrict. So the first thing we have to do is reject the dieting mentality altogether, and then we have to lift the restriction, right? Tell our bodies the famine is over, you're safe, it's all good. And then we start to listen to those intuitive cues, which is a process. It's not an overnight thing. It's not as sexy as, a quick fix diet or anything that's advertised, the sparkly, shiny diets out there, weight loss programs, but we have to really start listening to our bodies. And that's the best guidance we're ever going to get about how to eat in a way that's best for our bodies.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, if you're hearing us say the words intuitive eating, that's really about leaning in and listening to your body. And, you know, I always like to say your body is speaking to you. Are you listening? Like I call it body wisdom, because
Yeah.
I mean, this happens in our yoga practice too, right? Or even if we're exercising, a lot of people can over exercise too to compensate for their unhealthy eating patterns, which is over exercising can be unhealthy too.
Sure.
I want to kind of open up a conversation around, so we both agree like that we don't like calorie counting. We have our kind of thought, we don't really like diets, we don't really like fasting. Like we agree that there's no one thing that works for everybody.
Sure.
The one thing that I did do as a holistic health coach for years that I really loved was anti-inflammatory elimination diet. And the reason I did this is because of my own personal journey with both myself and my daughter, who had health crisis. And we discovered that we had multiple food sensitivities. And so we took out those, and this was, you know, at first recommended by the pediatrician. There's different words for this too. There's like the FODMAP, and there's the, you know, just the anti-inflammatory eating. And for me personally, that experience of really finding out that gluten didn't work for me and dairy didn't work for my other daughter was really life-changing, because interestingly enough, for now I've been gluten, I call it liberated, for 10 years now, and I feel amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, for her at the time, it actually allowed her to gain weight because she was so sensitive to it. Her belly was bloated. And when we were able to figure out in our family which foods worked for us and which foods didn't, which was a way of intuitive eating through elimination, you know, I guess what I'm noticing is there's kind of a fine line here, right? Like we did the elimination diet to take away the major inflammatory markers, gluten, soy, dairy, nuts, eggs, for 7 days. And then we added them back in and kind of discovered like, oh my gosh, when I eat gluten, I get migraines and nightmares. What are some tools that you use? Because that was what I used for a long time and worked really well for me. However, in saying that, what I noticed is like, I didn't, you know, I just kind of noticed that there were some people that were uncomfortable with that idea because they already had an unhealthy relationship with food and they didn't want to feel restrictive. And for me, it didn't feel restrictive. It felt empowering. So you can see how one experience is embodied two different ways for two different people based on our personal life experiences, right? Mine was from a health crisis, and a person who maybe had dealt with an eating disorder or, you know, kind of a struggle with their body image, that might not be a great fit for them. So what are some tools that you use with the people that you work with? Because there is a part where like intuitive eating, we can tell people you need to learn to listen to your body and what works for you, but how do they do that? Like what tools do you have available for that?
Yeah, this is a really common question that comes up. And so I have a podcast as well, and we just had a really good conversation with Erin Holt, who's a functional nutritionist. So I would encourage people to, if you are interested in this topic, to listen to that. So I just first want to name, in our practice, we are not treating people with medical issues or with extreme health challenges. We absolutely recognize that there's a need to be treated for that, and that's not our lane. We're not speaking to people or we're not working with people who are either struggling with a condition of some sort or with clinical eating disorders. So my personal, and Dana, my partners, our personal struggles are rooted in disordered eating and in this concept of needing to fix our bodies in order to be happy, right? So, and really focusing on weight loss. So that's who we're speaking with. And there's this sort of fine line, like you said, between intuitive eating and restricting in order to intuitive eating being a solution for that problem of restricting in order to lose weight. right? That's kind of what I name the line as is it weight loss, or is it to help you with a health crisis or challenge of some sort? A lot of people will attempt to do a cleanse of some sort to lose weight, not to try to figure out what's going on with their bodies in a medical.
And it will work temporarily.
Of course.
You'll reduce inflammation.
Yep. Yeah. And any diet will work temporarily for most people, right? The problem is that that's it. It's temporary. And the damage that can come out of that is it far outweighs the short-term benefits, right? For our mental health, for our physical health, for our general well-being. So that's kind of the line, is like, getting real honest with yourself. And this goes for any form of eating, not just an autoimmune protocol of any sort, or a detox of any sort. Like, what is it for? Is it to get to the root issue of what's going on with your body? Or is it for weight loss and trying to fix your body, right? And the way that you look, and trying to shrink yourself. So that's kind of where we have to get honest with ourselves. And to your point about eating in a way that you feel best at, like, that's intuitive eating, right? Even though there's an element of restriction with not eating gluten or anything else that makes you feel crappy, like, that's what we're doing. We're honoring what makes us feel best. And if that's, noticing that gluten doesn't feel great, then we're going to honor that and say, okay, I notice, everything's available to me. I can have any food is allowed. So when anything is allowed and nothing is off the table, I get to make that empowered choice, like you said, to eat in a way that feels best for my body. And so having all of the information is so valuable. And that's what we work with clients on, is like, okay, noting what feels good, what doesn't feel good, what am I excited about, and what brings me joy and satisfaction to eat, and what actually was I maybe restricting just because it was off limits, but it actually doesn't make me feel that good, right? So, we talk about this a lot, and our quintessential example is Tasty Delight ice cream from New York City in like the 2000s. So like, that was, the quote unquote healthy choice. So we'd go nuts with something like that, right? Or, something like that.
It gives you permission. All of a sudden you have permission to, like, I remember when I was making, like, chocolate superfood balls, and like, and people would be like, they would just make like 400 of them. Like, wait a minute. Like, it's not permission to only eat that. It's like, you got to have some balance.
Yeah. And it's like, when we're, it's that saying, what we resist persists. Like, we're going to fixate on whatever's restricted or off the table. So that's where the binging mentality comes up a lot, right? Is like, if we're constantly telling ourselves we can't have something, that's where like the obsessive thoughts come in. And so we have to kind of just figure out what makes us feel good, what actually supports our health, because that's what we're doing here. It's not the point. A lot of people, there's a misconception with intuitive eating that we're just like throwing our health out the window or forgetting about how we want to feel. Like, the opposite is true. We're really focusing on what makes us feel good and what we can do to honor our body and respect our body and, honor our general health. But that's not going to be in the form of restriction or deprivation if we're in order to lose weight. So does that kind of clarify? It's a really common thing that comes up. And so we enjoy talking about it, but it's tricky. And this is why it's tricky in the wellness industry too, because so much of quote unquote wellness is like the cleanses and the protocols and all the things, but we have to really get honest about what the outcome is. Is the outcome truly honoring our health, or is the outcome trying to shrink ourselves?
Yeah. And a lot of people do want to be told what to do. They want to be told what to do because they don't want the self-responsibility if they don't have the result they want. And so I want to invite the listeners to really kind of consider, like, if you've ever noticed yourself doing that, like looking for somebody to give you the answer. There's that saying where you can give a man a fish and feed him dinner, right, that night, or you can teach him to fish and then you feed him for a lifetime. Intuitive eating is the same way. If you can teach somebody the power, it's empowering to know what works for you. Because here's the thing, guys, your body changes. throughout your
Mm-hmm.
entire life. You go have a baby, which your partner Dana just had a baby, right?
Yep.
So you have a baby, your body is going to be different probably forever after you have that baby. When you're perimenopause, menopause, if you have a loss in your life, if you're experiencing high stress, things are going to change.
Yeah.
And so the gift of intuitive eating is just always knowing that, I mean, you always have the answer. You don't
Mhm.
need somebody to give it to you. It's really just an invitation to slow down and listen to your body, because what worked for us 20 years ago doesn't work for us now, and it won't work for
Mhm.
us 20 years from now.
Right,
So,
right.
I really just want to kind of like reiterate the importance of what it is that you're teaching. And we're both in alignment on this with intuitive eating. It is like the golden nugget, really, because it's something that once and that's where confidence comes to. You feel empowered, you feel confident, because you no longer have to seek the answers outside of yourself. Now, we're not saying that we're not giving you permission to you still have to take self-responsibility and take the correct action steps. You still want to be smart about it. You still want to have your doctor on standby. You still want to do the blood work. You still want to do all the things, right?
Yeah.
But the person who knows what works for each of us the best, and this, I learned this through parenting a child with a lot of health issues. That was my experience is that nobody knew her better than I did, because I was with her all the time. And so I
Yeah.
knew that what she was being told to do wasn't working, and nobody knew better than I did.
Mhm.
So I think Bridget and I want to invite the listeners to just be curious about what it could look like or feel like if you start listening to your body.
Yeah.
And I want to put emphasis on the feel, because you said mindset, and I've had people say to me, I did the mindset, I did the affirmations, it's not enough.
Mhm.
And in one of your recent emails, as I was reading through it, like, you went a little deeper and you talk about, it's the feeling it and the imagining it, like what you want.
Yeah.
So can you just tell us a little bit more about that? Because I want listeners to know what's possible, in that, well, this is where the self-responsibility comes in. Yes, we can do mindset work and we can do affirmations. And if you're still not feeling it in your body, if you're not totally believing it, if you're not buying in, then there's still a block there.
For sure. And this is kind of goes back to that clarity piece about like how do you actually want to feel? Because like we've talked about, sometimes the focus is so much on doing the right thing and checking off the task list of following the protocol or like eating the right foods or completing the workout or whatever. But if none of that is making us feel good, if it's actually like draining our energy or is not, we're having symptoms like fatigue or other physical symptoms like even, hair loss or losing our cycle or other things, like, but we're still trying to complete the task list for the sake of, following the right thing. That's not ever going to make us feel good. So it's getting that clarity. Okay, how do I want to feel? And having those things be feelings not on this weight loss focus or changing or like having an appearance focus. So when we ask people how they want to feel or what they want, what their desires are, a lot of times they are not feelings. They're things like, well, I would like to be 20 pounds lighter, or I would like to be, I would like to lose 2 dress sizes or something like that. And that's the focus we're talking about here, that's never going to be helpful. How do you want to feel every day in your body? Do you want to feel energized? Do you want to be connected to your body? Do you want to feel like have a clear focus and mind space? Do you want better sleep? Like, what are the things that we really want to be focusing on? Because that's going to change the action steps to get there, right? That's it. When we have a goal of more energy
Mm.
versus losing 20 pounds, like that changes the actual action steps that we're taking. There's so many things we can do to improve our energy, right? But when we put the focus on losing 20 pounds, the solution is typically go on a diet of some sort or restrict your
Mhm.
food or move more, which that actually can really deplete our energy. So we have to shift the focus of get clarity around what we actually want. And there's this other focus of like, what do we want to feel in our lives every day? And like, what do we actually want to work toward that is not fixing our appearance? Because pursuing those things brings us so much more fulfillment and meaning and purpose. And that's what our kind of low key mission is with our company, is like, how do we shift the focus on these more meaningful pursuits that aren't fixing our bodies to try to live up to these ridiculous societal standards? Because that's what's going to create a much better world for all of us. It's going to create, imagine if we, like, everyone was walking around fulfilled and like with purpose and happy, joyful, with a lot of meaning in their lives. Like, what our world would look so much different, right? Instead of so many people focusing on changing their appearance or using all their mind space trying to change the way they look, or all their time and energy. Like, we would just have such a different world. And we live in a, this sort of a side tangent. We live in a very patriarchal society that puts all these beauty standards often apply to women, right? And so women are spending all of their resources trying to live up to these ideals, and meanwhile men still hold a lot of the power in our society. So there's a lot of correlation between trying to keep women small and focused on these things versus making more noise and changing the world. I'm going down a major rabbit hole here. Tangent, but that's what we're talking about here, is like,
well, there's I think what you're saying is there's an energy to everything. And so what we give our energy and an intention to, which is different than a goal, because as you were talking, I was thinking, that's more in alignment with an intention. And so what I hear you saying is what you give your energy and intention to is what your reality will be. Like we started out by saying, your beliefs create your reality.
Right.
So the question was around like the feeling underneath the belief, which you answered. And that's what I wanted people to hear, is that the feeling is deeper than the belief, and the feeling has more energy, and what you put your energy and intention on is what you will believe and what your reality will be. And I love that you said, like, what would the world be like if we were all doing that? And what I want the listeners to consider for a second is, what would your world be like if you shifted your energy on your well-being to, what I forget what the exact words that you said, but rather than the results, but like what makes you happy, what makes you feel the way you want to feel. So what would happen for each of you listening in your world if you shifted your energy, your intention to how it is that you want to feel and show up in your life every day? What would be possible?
And typically, the interesting part is typically those ideals have nothing to do with our body size, right? So that's why we do this
they exercise. Unless you want to be a size 2 model, if that's your goal.
Right. Which is like ridiculous. That's just like reinforcing these standards. And now there's models of all sorts of sizes.
Thank God.
So, so you can this is why we do this exercise, because everything typically that you want, you can have in the body that you have now, but you don't maybe either believe that's possible, or you don't feel either motivated or inspired to, or energized enough to, because you're so caught up with this goal of weight loss or changing, altering your appearance. Right. And it's really powerful to recognize that's possible. And, we think, you touched on this a little bit earlier, and we often think that we need to have, this is why we compare ourselves to other bodies, or our past, even our own past bodies, that like, we're going to have a different life experience or outcome in a different body. And I think about my own life and everything that I wanted for myself, everything that, I thought was so far away, I needed to lose weight in order to be there. And I think about it now, and I'm in a different body than I was 10 years ago, for sure. Like you said, we're always evolving. I have these things in a different body that I would have thought wasn't possible. And yet we still have this focus on that we need to look different in order to have what's going to make us happy and fulfilled. And so.
Or I don't even think it's just, and I know you focus mostly on body image and looking different, but I would venture to say that we think we have to even perform differently or look differently, or, show up in a certain way. All of these, I'm just giving everybody permission right now to just let go of those expectations, just let go of perfectionism. Bridget and I are totally on board supporting you in that right now. It's overrated.
100%. And we get to create new standards for ourselves. We get to, whose expectations are we living up to? We ask our clients that all the time. Like, we get to create new standards for ourselves that are based on our own happiness and our own version of success, whatever that looks like for us.
And when we do that, it's not just about ourselves, it's about other women and our friends and our children and our daughters. And it, like, the ripple effect just goes on. So all of this that we're talking about just goes so much deeper. It's a much needed conversation. So I really appreciate you being on the show today. I want to recap and then invite you to share, some of the offerings so that people can find you and listen to your podcast, because your podcast is amazing. I don't even know. It probably has lots of downloads, I would guess. I didn't do the research on that, but I just kind of want to recap for the listeners that we started out with the invitation to talk about how do we kind of identify if we're in that place of having an unhealthy relationship with our body and our body image, kind of moving through the energy of body shame to maybe more confidence. And the things that came up as we talked today, one is that we need clarity on how we want to show up and how we want to live our life. It's really important for us to spend the time to get clear on what that is. And to be honest, most people are, quote, too busy to take that time. So this is an invitation right here, right now. You're listening. Take 5 minutes today to think about, get clarity on what it is that you want in your life, or, how you want your well-being to show up. The second thing that we talked about is intuitive eating and really letting go of unhealthy behavioral patterns that aren't sustainable, such as dieting. And dieting is a big word that can mean many, many things, but I'm just going to throw in there fasting, over exercising, binge eating. We can even throw like binge drinking, binge anything. Everything needs to be in balance. So getting super clear on having a healthy relationship through intuitive eating. There are tools that can help you. And as you do this, keeping in mind, you want to have the balance of self-responsibility to take correct action steps and get support, because everything is better with support. And then the third thing we talked about is really getting clear on also kind of the underneath the belief, which is the feeling, and getting kind of even more clarity on how do you actually want to feel? Because that's really all that matters. Like, how do you want to feel in your body, in your life? How do you want to show up? I think this third part is it kind of goes deeper than the belief. It goes into the, like, at the end of your life, like, how do you want to feel about, your life story? So thank you for all of that. I just kind of wanted to wrap that up like a nice little gift for the listeners. And I want to invite you to share, where can people find you? Do you have a new offering? I know you guys do webinars. Just go ahead and share where people can find more information.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And that was such a lovely recap. So thank you. I love that, that idea. So we're at wellnesslately.com. That's kind of our hub for everything, where you can find us. But we also, like you said, have a podcast of the same name, Wellness Lately, where we interview other people, but we also have some episodes of just us teaching on these things. So, and then we have a Facebook group that's free, where we do weekly live trainings as well. So people can join that. If you just search Wellness Lately, that should pop right up, or I can send you the link. But so that's our group, our private Facebook group. And then, we do have a coaching program where we walk people through this process of intuitive eating and body image acceptance and upgrading and mindset, the clarity and confidence piece as well. We break it into 3 parts. So depending on when this airs, we should have another round coming up, but we're always just open to talking to people to see if that's a good fit for them to work with us. And I think that covers it. It's we also have a really helpful webinar that people can jump on anytime. So I can send you the link to that. It's a food freedom masterclass where we walk you through the 5 steps that we work with our client, like the exact 5-step strategy we use with our clients. So if you're kind of new to intuitive eating or any of this stuff, that's a really great place to start in terms of getting this info and starting to implement it in a really practical way. And that's free as well.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll definitely share that link in the show notes. Wellness Lately on Instagram, Facebook, podcast, website. And I just want to say, like, there is so much like healing, I think, like in the acceptance and the freedom of being in the support of a group.
Yeah,
I really do believe that. Just being able to show up in a group and be seen and share your story or share your struggles or get support or kind of hear what other people are doing. There's so much power in that. It's the beauty of the world we live in today, is that we can do that through Facebook and through other platforms. So
yeah, and just to know you're not alone in that process,
totally.
and there's other people on the same path, and there's other people when you have a, poor body image moment, or you have, you're stuck in that diet cycle, to know that there are people you can turn to. Versus, I think a lot of times when we have a bad body image moment, it's what triggers us to start the diet again, or to spiral into the negative self-talk. So to have a group to say, here's what I'm going through. Is anyone else relating to this? And there's always other people relating to this. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and and what I hear you saying in my own words is a lot of times what happens underneath all of that is that we might feel shame, and the kind of the gift to be revealed in it is to reveal the shame that helps us to move out of it, right? That's like how we sort of like work through it. So your Facebook group is just a really great opportunity to, and supportive environment to work through those things. So so happy to have you on here, Bridget. I look forward to seeing you in April.
Yes, that'll be so much fun. And thank you so much for the opportunity, Jen. This was a blast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Aloha.